It was a perfect day for Yodahyuk. His hard work to lose weight had finally paid off, and he was down 30 lbs from his original weight from 6 months ago. That wasn't all, his grades for the final exams he checked after confirming his weight were the best out of all 3 years in college combined, even if it was only to Dahyuk's standards. Well, I have finally seen the payoff for being more attentive in my life. He was humming as he took out his cell phone. There, he found his third accomplishment where he surpassed the weight loss goal and good grades. Dahyuk, where are you? Choi Jaemin. She was one of the prettiest girls from this year's freshman class. She had a petite body frame and a cute face, and everyone would think gymnast Sun Yeon-jae was her look-alike when they met her for the first time. She had so many guys drooling over her, but it was Dahyuk who snatched her heart. Dahyuk, I'm in front of the market. I'm buying veggies to cook with the meat. Running into Jaemin in front of the gym when he was about to work out was crucial. What guy wouldn't challenge himself when a girl they had the hots for was keeping her eyes on them? I wouldn't have lost weight if it wasn't for you. Dahyuk placed his phone back into his pocket with a bitter grin. The sight of a non-athletic guy trying his best and gradually getting better must have left an impression. Around May, Dahyuk and Jaemin were close enough to go for a coffee after a workout, and he courted her back home. In June, it was clear that they were dating. And today, Dahyuk talked Jaemin into coming over to his bachelor pad to offer her home-cooked chopped steak. Should I get wine? Maybe I should keep it casual with beer. While working his brain at the market, his eyes wandered towards something. There was a tower. Oh, geez, maybe it had been a little over a month. Towers appeared all over the world. It was black and shaped like a long nail placed upside down. They were all a whopping 200 meters tall. These monoliths didn't grow from earth or fall from the sky, and it caused the world to shake. Experts from all over the world had conducted studies about these towers for a long time now, but nothing had come out of it. A total of 2,365 towers, which were thicker than a lighthouse, were standing around with no other effects. Humans are creatures that adapt fast. That was exactly right. It didn't even take 3 weeks for people to get used to the towers. The religious groups and scientists were still up in arms in the media, but the regular people were just wondering about the tower with no hesitation. Dahyuk walked into the market. His definition of knowing how to cook chopped steak was to read the recipes online, but he had lived on his own for a few years, so he has, at least, cooked a meal or two for himself. First, I need potatoes, butter. Do they have asparagus here? Including the 2 thick slabs of meat, Dahyuk was carrying a basket worth of half a week's worth of food. But how could it compare to the worth of a fluttering heart? Beep, the cashier was about to hand back his cash card. Please throw away the receipt. And while he was packing the grocery bag, it happened. Oh, excuse me, Dahyuk called out with dismay. The hand of the cashier lady who was handing back the cash card was frozen as if someone had pressed a pause button. Not only that, her dilated pupils lost focus, and her mouth was agape. Miss, is she having some cardiac issues? Dahyuk raised his voice and looked around. His shock escalated right after. Everyone in the market was frozen in place and had the same symptoms as the cashier lady. Thousands of thoughts ran through Dahyuk's head, but before he reached a conclusion, gasp, horror, people moved again. Everyone seemed shocked. They took a deeper breath while looking over their bodies. Their reactions were strange. I'm alive. I'm alive. There were those who raised their hands in emotion. Honey, Sangchul. Those with their families or significant others embraced one another and cried as if they had been apart for years. However, the intense reaction was short-lived. After the brief cheers and hugging each other and crying their eyes out, they soon closed their mouths shut and stared around with vigilance in their eyes, as if they were being hostile to one another. What is this? People moved again. However, the movement differed from before. Everyone put their baskets down as if no one cared about grocery shopping anymore and left the market. Dahyuk had to step back in surprise since everyone was ignoring the line at the cashier. He was blankly staring at the people's movement. Dahyuk met eyes with a man. The man was still inside the market over at the cash register. His eyes were wide open like a fish and his gaze was on Dahyuk. What is it? Dahyuk felt a chill run down his spine. The man looked around and dug through the abandoned carts. He finally found a kitchen knife in one cart, and as the man ripped the package off with no hesitation, Dahyuk subconsciously had an intuition. Right now, stomp. He felt killing intent for the first time in his life. The man ran toward Dahyuk. He pushed everyone in his way and jumped on the counter to run over them. The man's body and the shining blade was definitely facing Dahyuk. If Dahyuk didn't turn his body to avoid the man, the knife would bust his head open. The man stumbled because of the shock from the landing, but he fixed his posture and swerved the knife again. Fortunately, Dahyuk was fast on his feet at a time like this. He kicked the man on the side and made him fall. Dahyuk wasn't stupid enough to fight a guy with a knife with his hand alone. Help! He's trying to stab me with a knife. Dahyuk screamed on top of his lungs and looked around. Everyone gave him a short glance and continued to go their way. No, it wasn't exactly everyone. A few of them stopped after hearing Dahyuk's voice. However, they weren't coming to help Dahyuk. Instead, they stood still and stared at Dahyuk, just like how the knife-wielding man did. Just as expected, they also looked around their surroundings. Dahyuk knew what they were looking for. What the hell was happening? Everyone was holding a weapon or two. The fallen guy was getting up on his feet. Dahyuk had no choice. He began to run as fast as he could. An empty street near the market. Horror. Dahyuk leaned against the light pole and let out his heavy breath. His heart was about to burst from the sprint. Why aren't they picking up the phone? He called several times while running, but 911 didn't answer the phone. What's happening? He could only assume. He had a side view of the streets while running here. It was not just the market, something had, in fact, happened to the whole neighborhood. Something Dahyuk knew nothing about. And that something made people do some weird things. It especially made some of them attack Dahyuk with weapons in their hands. Vroom, an old car appeared on the other side of the street. Usually, it was an element that didn't cause fear. However, Dahyuk had an ominous thought in his head, and that saved his life. The car accelerated toward Dahyuk. It was a crazy speed for a small street like this. For the first time in his life, Dahyuk threw his body on the floor. Boom! The sound of a car crashing into a light pole shook the whole street. Dahyuk let out a sigh and stood up. Click! A bald man in his mid to late 40s with a big stomach came out of the car. What the hell, man? I have nothing against you, he spat out such an obvious fact in such a serious tone. Only, you are weaker than I am. That's all. What on earth? What do you mean? The man rushed toward Dahyuk without answering anything. Dahyuk did not run away. His anger was greater than his fear. Die, you bastard. Dahyuk threw a punch to hit the man. Thump. But it was Dahyuk who was hit in the stomach and staggered. The man was not athletic, and he was a head shorter than Dahyuk. But he avoided Dahyuk's punch and drove his fist into Dahyuk's body. Gar. Dahyuk fell to the floor, and the man looked down at his fist for a moment, then opened the back door of his car. He was holding a golf club in each hand. If I kill you, nature is mine. I can live in the phenomenal 9 instead of you now. The world is at my feet. What the? You bastard. You. Dahyuk gathered all his strength and stood up and backed away, but it was hard just to stand up, and the man walked toward him. The man was about to swing a golf club at him. Get down. A very familiar voice sounded. Dahyuk's body reacted faster than he could think. As soon as Dahyuk dodged, shiny metal pieces flew over his body. A remote stun gun, a so-called taser bullet. Kick! The man was hit directly in the electrode and shuddered to the floor. Dahyuk turned and looked at the owner of the taser gun. I saw your last text, so I ran to the market and there was a big commotion. Luckily I arrived on time. It was Jaimin. Where did you get that? Oh, this. Jaimin retrieved the taser electrodes and replied in a calm voice. I stole it from an empty police car. Don't worry, this won't kill him. I'm sure he deserved it. Maybe it was Dahyuk's imagination, but Jaimin's voice and demeanor were completely different, like he was a different person. Let's go to your house first. Alone with Jaimin in his room, Dahyuk had dreamed of this moment for a long time, but never thought it would come true under the circumstances. Click. It was only after they had locked the deadbolt on the door that they began their conversation. Just as I thought, Jaimin began, sighing. You have no memory, do you? About what? Dahyuk held his throbbing stomach as he asked her the question. They hadn't spoken a word as they walked to his house. A recollection of my memory before I was born again, Jaimin began to explain as he looked outside through the peephole. I'll cut to the chase. As of now, most people around the world have returned from the future. Even so, they will only be remembered. Dahyuk was silent, not because he had nothing to say, but because he had to consider the meaning of her words. That is also why people tried to kill you. Fortunately, people did not notice you in the future, because your image would change drastically. But soon they will flock to kill you, Dahyuk. I understood this without having to think much about it. What the hell did I do? That's one of the rules. She crossed the room, closed the curtains, and finally sat down on the floor with a big sigh. Then with a big sigh she sat down on the floor. Then she continued, the rule of the new world, she said, is that each person can only have one nativity. Dahyuk did not yet understand the meaning of these words, but he would soon. But in first kill, you can collect the nature of the victim as your own, he said. In other words, are they trying to get what I have by killing me? I don't know what that is, but I don't have anything and. No, you have. She cut him off and looked up. Do Hyuk was speechless. No need to explain. I will have you awaken at midnight. Her eyes were different from the 20-year-old girl he knew. A few years later, you achieve greatness. You will be one of the 9 in the world to enter the realm of the great transcendence and lead all other human beings to finally succeed in killing that asshole. Asshole. Do Hyuk was caught off guard as he had never heard Jaemin curse before. However, Jaemin dutifully replied, God. After a moment of silence, Do Hyuk asked again, did you just say God? Don't make me say it again. Jaemin was different. This woman with her back against the wall and her arms crossed was not the 20-year-old freshman he knew. In a few hours, at midnight, that bastard will invade our planet. After saying those words, Jaemin braced himself to tell the long story of a warrior who had survived years of war. And you can. She took a breath and then began to recount an epic tale of courage. At least, she tried to. Boom, 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 boom. Their conversation was interrupted as the ground shook with a loud bang. Earthquake. Do Hyuk's face was shocked. No way. But compared to Da Hyuk, Jaemin's expression was beyond surprised. I can't believe it's starting so soon. She opened the curtains that had been closed earlier and looked outside. Do Hyuk couldn't believe her eyes. The black spire, the tower that had stood there mysteriously for a month, was spinning furiously. Perhaps the phenomenon he was seeing was happening to other towers as well. He wanted to react somehow, to say something, but before he could, the words jumped in front of him, startling him. Kasita's needle, spin activated. By the time the words stopped flashing, his body was covered in pain and he fell to the ground. It was as if an unknown force was crushing his body, and all Do Hyuk could do was to let it crack. Groaning in pain with his face on the ground, Do Hyuk realized that the pain was familiar. It was muscle pain. It was as if his joints were being forcibly stretched. The word floated in front of his eyes again, and he could no longer see his surroundings. Transcending the species to its maximum capabilities, confirmed, furious smiley, advancing the individual to the limit of its normal development, confirmed, Do Hyuk felt an aura of healing pervading every inch of his body. It eased his suffering, but the pain still took over him. Boom, boom. Do Hyuk heard the sound both inside his body and from his surroundings. Had the earthquake blurred his vision? Was it his body shaking worse as time passed? All he knew was that he could not endure the pain any longer. Jaemin. He groaned and looked around for her. Do Hyuk soon realized that she was on the floor, shaking uncontrollably as well. Then he saw her consciousness fading into the distance. How long had it been since she had awakened from unconsciousness? When Do Hyuk opened his eyes, it was already dark outside. When the earthquake stopped and he regained his composure, he noticed something unusual about himself. Not only had the pain disappeared, but his movements were lighter than before, and he seemed to be somewhat larger. He asked, Jaemin, Choi Jaemin. Jaemin was still lying on the ground. Do Hyuk looked at her breathing. She did not appear to be seriously ill, but unlike Do Hyuk, she seemed to be taking a long time to regain consciousness. Jaemin appeared outwardly unharmed, but Do Hyuk wanted to go over to her side to check her condition, just to be sure. But before he could do so, the words once again jumped in front of his eyes. Individual, Yo Da Hyuk's physical development completed. Furious smiley, word, utilize, status, to check ability level. The words suddenly appeared in front of him and blocked his way. What the foo? When faced with an anomaly that humans perceive as normal, there were two kinds of people. One was those who had the ability to disconnect from their thought processes and use an external medium to free themselves from stress. There were also those who searched for the power within themselves to discover answers to understand the situation. Thankfully, Do Hyuk was of the latter type. An unspecified number of people were trying to kill him, but all Do Hyuk could think about was how to understand the story of Jaemin's resurrection, the gods, or what she was trying to say. He could think, but if he stood around doing nothing to adapt to his circumstances, his life would be in danger. Having said that, status, Do Hyuk mumbled in defeat. A list of words began to form in front of his eyes, describing his condition. Ability, strength, 17. Stamina, 21. Agility, 15. Magic, 2. Endurance, 17. Charisma, 14. Religion, currently, there is no defined religion. Skills, currently there are no skills set. Talent, personal survival, LV. 2. Wolf sharpness, LV. 1. Finally, the words, nature, were displayed, as if to say, please read. As he was about to check the details, Jaemin groaned behind him and regained consciousness. You're about to see something you're not going to like. It is your seed money. Do Hyuk tried hard to give a good answer, but when he turned to face her, their eyes met and he lost the calm he had built up. Jaemin was different. She had always been petite, but it was never accurate to call her skinny, because she was not out of shape. It is never accurate to call her thin because she is not out of shape. But that description of her is no longer true. Her clothes, which used to fit her perfectly, are now shorter and looser. Her height has increased by a head. The texture of her skin has also changed from soft to silky. Jaimin's body now resembles that of a gymnast. Oh, this. Jaimin acknowledged the confusion in Dahyuk's eyes. Sorry, I didn't mean to stare. It's okay. My body has changed. Did you see the words that came out when it hurt? Dahyuk nodded his head in answer. Our bodies were developed by the Force. We have transcended to the final extent that the human body can. If we wanted to, we could run marathons forever and never run out of energy. She ran her hand from her chest to her stomach and motioned for Dahyuk to follow her. Dahyuk complied and placed both hands on his chest. What he felt was a firm, curving shape. It wasn't just his imagination from earlier, but his body had grown. He could clearly feel his pecs, his abs, and even the lines of his abdominal muscles that weren't there before. How? How is this possible? Maybe God is teaching us these ridiculous things. Simple answer. Instead of adding more to that statement, Jaimin pointed his finger behind Dahyuk. She pointed to the scene outside the window. Go see for yourself what's going on outside. Don't make any noise. Dahyuk approached the window. Can you see it? It was dark outside, but the difference was clear even from a glance. There are a lot, right? The night sky in Seoul is nothing but darkness. Only the occasional full moon is visible in the midst of it. Tonight, the moon was not the only orb in the sky. No. Was the moon he was familiar with the same as the one he was looking at? It took a few moments before he could process what he was seeing. The smallest orb, the moon, hovering in the skies was as big as a ping-pong ball. However, the gigantic one beside it was of such great proportions, Dahyuk could only hide them from his sight if he placed his palms a few inches from his face. How big and how close did it have to be to Earth to appear that large? As he marveled at the orbs in the skies, losing his grasp on reality, he was late to notice a terrifying scene. Under the sky, the streets Dahyuk used to know had transformed into something sinister. Rocks. Monstrous rocks burst out of the asphalt and the concrete of the city, towering over the skyscrapers. Not to mention, the dense forest-like terrain created by the random trees and vines were spewing out of the huge rocks. Half of the buildings, or more than half, were destroyed by the tectonic movement. Dahyuk's house was not spared from the onslaught as well, and it seemed that only the room they were in remained intact. The lower part of his house had been eaten away by the green invasion. Kasata's needle, they called it. Every time that tower rotated, the earth would overlap with another world. Jaimin gestured his head in the distance, shaking it toward the black tower that had stopped spinning. It's supposed to start spinning in the middle of the night. What the hell is going on? Jaimin was about to throw a tantrum over the destruction the tower had caused, but a loud noise interrupted her. It came from not too far away, a roaring sound that sounded like a mixture of the dinosaur noises and foghorns Dahyuk had seen in movies when he was a child. Well, that was definitely the sound of a creature. I didn't have to be there to know. I don't know what kind of creature it was, but it must have been a predator that was wreaking havoc. Its roar was like a warning of their doom. Damn. Jaimin knew what the creature was, so she reached out and closed the curtain. But someone moved faster than her hand. It was Dahyuk's. Okay, his skin was pale and his hands were trembling, but they were not stiff. Too serious, focused eyes pierced Jaimin with a look. Tell me everything I need to know. What is going on out there? That monstrous roar I heard a few seconds ago made him realize the gravity of his situation. There is no need to waste words or time trying to make me understand something. Just accept it. Otherwise, he will die. Indefinitely. Of course, Jaimin replied without hesitation. First, we need to kill someone. Because of nature. Jaimin answered in the affirmative, but instead of answering with words, Jaimin kicked the floor and jumped. It wasn't a very high jump, just a few inches off the ceiling. But when Jaimin landed on the floor a few seconds later, Dahyuk was left with her mouth agape. How many times did she spin? It was not a vertical rotation, but a somersault in the air. Jaimin had changed direction several times in that short period of time to complete it. When her feet were about to touch the floor, Dahyuk expected the wooden floor to yield to the impact. Instead, a knick-knack. After her feet touched the ground, the only sound she made was a light tap that was barely audible. This is the effect of my nature, Jaimin said. And after balancing herself as if nothing had happened, she continued her story. She didn't stumble a bit. Gum body. My flexibility is far beyond the limits of a normal human body. I am capable of more varied and advanced movements beyond human capabilities. I can perform movements that would strain human joints and muscles without any problem. I do have my limitations, but I think it's quite a nice nature. I have a lot of uses for it in the beginning. That description makes it sound like a passive skill. Dahyuk's eyes widened in surprise as he predicted what he was about to say. Jaimin saw his surprise and smiled faintly. It was the first smile Dahyuk had seen from her since the world had suddenly changed. I was comparing it to what you said to me a long time ago, when I was a fool to stand in your way. The smile quickly faded and Jaimin continued her explanation. You are right. It's passive. It's kind of a basic skill a character has when playing an AOS game. Like I said, everyone has one from birth, and you can have up to 2 by acquiring the nature of the first murder victim. I think my nature is pretty good. Dahyuk mused as he thought of the people who had tried to kill him. Calling it good will be offensive to your nature. It would be an understatement to say your nature is above all else. It's number 1. Her words didn't make it realistic. Status, Dahyuk mumbled once again to check the list of his stats and continued reading from where he stopped earlier, the description of his nature. The beginning part goes as follows: nature, flavor of iron, unique nature of individual, Dahyuk. Does it say flavor of iron? Yeah, but. While squinting his eyes, Dahyuk attempted to ask Jaimin a question when a strong burst of light, as intense as the high beam of a car, gleamed towards the room. Simultaneously, a figure appeared from a distance, basking from the glory of its luminance. Rejoice the glory that has been bestowed upon you. A beautiful and soft voice, so incredible they could feel its tenderness in their hearts, rang on top of Dahyuk's head. As the light lost its intensity, Dahyuk could now see who the source of the glowing light was. It was located on the black tower in the distance. There was a gigantic figure of a man hovering over the top of it. The unknown character had 2 massive wings around from side to side, each bigger than the tower itself. Yes, the figure was undoubtedly an angel. By the name of the great deity, Kasata, I give you your first suffering. Talking out of your ass, stupid B*TCH, Jaimin mumbled behind her breath, her voice filled with nothing but hatred. I want to rip her head off, but we have no choice since we're in the beginning state. Listen, you must pass the test that B*TCH is talking about. You're lucky you have me. I memorize the strategy. First, you must know what is happening. The soft-spoken angel shifted its tone and spoke, baffled. The test hasn't even begun, but so many became blinded after obtaining a nature and began slaughtering each other. A moment of silence followed. When the angel spoke again, the voice was sterner. Fine. For those villains who have forsaken the word of the Lord by acting according to their instincts, you must prepare for the appropriate chapter of your demise. For those who already obtained 2 natures, I will smite you with an excruciating pain heaven alone could only give. And no way. Another unpredicted situation. Jaimin's voice quivered, but she regained her composure right away and turned to Dahyuk. It's all right. You and I haven't killed anyone yet, so that won't apply to us. I think it applies to me. What? Jaimin's eyes opened wide. Dahyuk's expression was no different. If it wasn't for the angel, he was about to ask Jaimin how to understand what was happening. I mean, my status implied so. The letters in front of his eyes gleamed the same as before. On the space invisible to Jaimin, the following words appeared: nature, flavor of steel, unique nature of individual, Dahyuk. And underneath it, over the horizon, obtained by killing individual, Kasata. I will first isolate the evil beings. As the angel's voice echoed across the horizon, Dahyuk's body began to gleam brightly, and it flickered as if it was about to disappear along with him. I will gift the first suffering. Do, Dahyuk. Jaimin screamed as loud as she could, but there was no response from Dahyuk. Not because he ignored her, but because he had to turn around to grab a certain object from his desk. Dahyuk was able to face Jaimin again after he got what he wanted to take on his hands. He tried speaking up, but it was already too late. Even if they were to speak, nothing would have changed. Spark. A burst of light flared bright, and Dahyuk disappeared from the room. Jaimin lost the calm demeanor she had been showing Dahyuk up until now and covered her mouth with her bare hands. I couldn't protect him, prot. She thought she could have another chance in life. She believed she could be by Dahyuk's side as an ally instead of a burden. She was so lost, she couldn't keep her confusion from herself. The development of the situation that was going on now was in contradiction with the future which she knew. After moments of wallowing in her own self-loathing, Jaimin raised her head. He cannot die. He was Dahyuk. He was the man who stood at the top of the world before time had reversed. He will survive, no matter what. There must be something she could do other than crying like an idiot. She needed to train harder to give more strength to Dahyuk, who would live through this and stood by her side again. With a determined expression, Jaimin clenched her lips shut. Then, she focused her attention on the angel's voice which rang from within her head. The burning burst of light ceased, and Dahyuk felt the chilling air before he opened his eyes. A small ache punctured through his head. Dahyuk was relocated outside of his room. It wasn't difficult to figure out where he was. It was a busy street Dahyuk visited countless times in the past. However, it had been a month since he last visited this area. One of the black towers stood right in the middle of the road. The said tower stood 20 meters away from Dahyuk, looking down at his puny size. The six-winged angel, whom Dahyuk saw from afar within the confines of his room, hovered over the tower. He was at least 7 to 8 meters tall. The angel watched Dahyuk's every movement. In fact, he wasn't the only one, the winged giant, that was watching. What is happening? It wasn't only Dahyuk who relocated to the street near the black tower. Even from Dahyuk's perspective, hundreds of people were bustling around figuring out what had happened to them. Right as he gazed through the strangers' faces, Dahyuk used the object he grabbed from his room. It was a disposable dust mask. Most of the people he knew owned one of these for a while due to the severe fine dust. Dahyuk was no different. He would be able to hide his face with this. Everyone on the street had taken someone else's life. If what Jaimin said was true, a person was born with only one nature, and anyone could obtain a second one after murdering someone. The voice which echoed from within his head announced he would isolate all who owned two natures. That meant everyone here must have killed at least one person. But I haven't killed anyone. That was the obvious fact that Dahyuk knew better than anyone else. Then why? A frivolous laugh resounded through the air. Dahyuk raised his head towards the sky. Numerous angels draped in lights appeared 3 to 4 meters above the air and began looking down the crowd. Are these the heinous creatures? They all have innocent faces. The figures possessed the form of angels, but something seemed off about them. First of all, their sizes were different from the enormous one floating from the above tower. They were a bit larger than humans, but not gigantic. They had one wing on their back instead of a pair, and the features of their faces, as well as their limbs, looked unbalanced as if they weren't completed figures. The creatures were spread a few meters away from each other while they talked loud among one another. You better listen to what the almighty angel told you carefully. Consider yourselves lucky, you inbreds. Your kind received the grace of the Lord Kasata and earned a chance to evolve into higher beings. Unlike the voice he heard from his room, their voices were not coming from his head but through their mouths. Even the way they spoke was far different from the soft one he heard earlier. Theirs sounded cheap and distasteful. From now on, your world will collide with other realms for all eternity to train you stronger than your own kind. Death alone awaits those who can't adapt fast enough. After those words, the single-winged angels halted to a pause. They looked at each other in dismay. They are not freaking out. I can't even see fear in their eyes. They were right. In a normal situation, humans would be petrified in their own fear and wouldn't function properly no matter what the angels said. However, this was not a normal situation. They were surprised not because of what the angels said but because of the sudden relocation. As soon as the winged ones appeared in the air, everyone calmed down and stared at them. It was as if they knew this would stop something bad from happening to them. There should have been a few of them going crazy by now. Right, it is fun to destroy them to serve as an example. The angels shrugged in disappointment. Oh well, here, get this. Newer words appeared before Dahyuk's eyes. Coin purse created, furious smiley, 500 coins deposited, furious smiley, use the word wallet for access. This is the war fund gifted to you by Kasata. Your weak-ass bodies have already been trained to the max, so you can't get any stronger by regular means. You can only buy ability. The angels' blabbering mouths were shut once again. No one was listening to what they were saying. Wallet, wallet. Everyone was yelling out the word to access their wallets, and they were purchasing abilities already. What the hell is happening? The angels hadn't even finished explaining, but everyone decided right away which abilities to purchase and began spending the coins. They are understanding this too fast. Are they smarter than we think? The only exception was Dahyuk. Wallet. He mumbled the word under his breath and began reading the words laid in front of him carefully. Wallet, coins owned, 500, able to use the coin to increase abilities, need 50 coins to increase up to F rank, 0-10, abilities. Ability, muscle strength, 17, E, stamina, 21, E, agility, 15, E, magic, 2, F, endurance, 17, E, charisma, 14, E, based on Dahyuk's understanding, he would need 200 coins to allocate a point to one of his abilities. Besides magic, Dahyuk couldn't make any changes to his abilities aside from this method. Let's think this through. It was an obvious choice. Even in simple video games, investing in abilities without any information was the same as pointing a gun at his own head. Well, whatever, let's start this madness. When the single-winged angels waved their hand in the air, yellow-colored liquid sprayed all over the place. The foul-smelling liquid splashed all over the street and drenched everyone. This is the extracted pheromones of the goblet. Normally, we would separate the sections around the tower to train you, but we created a special confined area for you disgusting creatures. Before they were able to finish speaking, Shuffle. Dahyuk heard the sounds of something walking through the tall grass fields created by the vines which appeared in between the buildings. Soon, numerous creatures began to emerge. Their heads looked like a hybrid of a dog and a rat. They were about 140 centimeters tall. Their backs were hunched and repulsive hair covered their bodies. They shook their rat-like tails like fish out of the water. These creatures were twice in number compared to the humans, outnumbering them. Dahyuk could understand. The creatures were the goblets the angels were talking about, and they were far too dangerous. You've never seen a goblet, huh? Here, try to survive from them while they are in heat. You can earn coins when you kill them, and if one of you shows an outstanding performance, you'll get a special prize. If you survive, maybe it was the effect of the pheromones sprayed by the angels because the long and slanted eyes of the goblets were bloodshot red. The hundreds of low growls created an ominous harmony, making Dahyuk fearful of them. T. Dahyuk half-consciously took a few steps backward. He ended up accidentally bumping into someone behind him. Watch it. With a sharp voice, someone pushed Dahyuk away. It was a guy around Dahyuk's age. Don't come next to me again, or I'll kill you. Dahyuk raised both his hands and walked away from the guy. It was Dahyuk who ran into him first, but why the F***ck is he lowering his voice like that? It wasn't only the guy he bumped into, but everyone was acting the same. The tense atmosphere was understandable, but it seemed like everyone was trying to throw their weights around more than necessary. A strong hint of self-confidence was written all over their expressions. All that talk about the special isolation, and it was only goblets. The first achievement will be mine. Each of them all jabbered similar things and began to crack their knuckles as if the goblets didn't scare them one bit. Shriek. With a ripping scream from the other side, the goblets began to charge towards them. They were running on all fours with their eyes glowing in fiery red and drooling with foamy spit. Dahyuk observed the creatures and everyone braced themselves to fight their way out with their bare hands. These bastards can fight them only with their hands. It seemed possible seeing as how confident the people reacted. However, tap tap. Instead of raising his fist, Dahyuk began running into a building that wasn't overtaken by the vines yet. Even so, I don't have any information. Besides, his instinct was telling him something that those creatures were dangerous. They couldn't kill them with their hands alone. What a loser. The people laughed as they watched Dahyuk ran. Goblets were one of the weaker monsters. They appeared at the beginning of the first suffering, but if fearless men with their potential fight with appropriate weapons, it was easy enough for one of them to fight 3 of the creatures at the same time. Therefore, no one on the street feared the goblets. For those who had experienced the future before the resurrection, fighting 5 of them at the same time should be easy even with their fist. Shriek. Finally, when the distance was narrowed down enough, the goblets jumped to attack. Everyone except Dahyuk got ready to fight instead of running away. Die. Their fists fly towards the goblets. However, shriek. The result was different from what they had imagined. Arr! What the? The goblets were fast and fierce, 100 times stronger than the ones in their memories. Hey, you idiots underestimated goblets way too much. Do they consider goblets weak in this world? Well, they are weak, but we did give them 250% extracted pheromones. The goblets will fight till the end without considering their bodies getting destroyed. The angels giggled as they watched the devastation on the street. Even so, I didn't think they'll try to fight with their bare hands. If they had found some kind of weapon to throw around, they could have had some chances. I thought they will be smarter since they already had some blood on their hands. As they said, the goblets were enhanced by the angels, but they were not stronger than normal. With that small change alone, the past battle experiences of the humans were rendered useless. Not to mention, the battle patterns of the crazed goblets were far different from what they had been accustomed to, and more than anything, their ignorance strengthened the goblets further. The benefit of knowing the future made them vulnerable without realizing it. In an instant, the street was filled with their agonizing screams. On top of the movements and attack pattern, the horny goblets were able to land impactful attacks than what was deemed normal. While the humans scrambled in disbelief, more goblets piled up to attack. This can't be happening. People began to fall as several goblets ripped them apart. Death alone awaits their arrival. No one thought it would be this agonizing to die on their second chance. They began to run off with their confidence in between their legs. It didn't matter if they had 2 natures. They didn't stand a chance when their basic abilities were so weak. There were no confident returners anymore. Instead, there were only beginners caught off guard by the alteration they had faced. A few minutes ago, when other goblets ambushed the people with their fists up, hiss, one goblet headed off into a different direction alone. He could smell the stench over there. He couldn't see it, but there was a building where the pheromone could be smelt from inside. The goblet followed its instinct and walked towards the building. It headed into an open building, following the stench of the pheromones towards the lobby. As it turned around the corner, crack, a sudden blunt impact crushed its face. It was Dahyuk. He, who was waiting around the corner with a fire extinguisher in his hands, ambushed the goblet. The goblet didn't die, but the blow which Dahyuk swung with all of his might onto the creature was too strong. Dahyuk was not stupid to miss this chance. Eek! Crack! Smash! Dahyuk smashed the creature's body until the goblet lost his balance and fell to the ground. Only then did it cease to move. Dahyuk kept smashing the goblet's head with the fire extinguisher. He didn't know anything about the future, but that was the reason he succeeded. Goblet killed. This caution and cunning idea was possible due to Dahyuk panicking like a tensed-up scaredy-cat. This was the ultimate weapon which allowed humans to be on top of the food chain. Gained 20 coins, Furious Smiley, first hunting achievement reached within the section. Before Dahyuk was able to comprehend the words which appeared, he felt a jolt of energy running through his body. With the bloody fire extinguisher in his hand, he hid behind the corner again. It was like the magic behind animal instincts. He could hear the footsteps of the second goblet from the building entrance. Before he could realize it, the words appeared once again. Achievement, First Hunter obtained, Furious Smiley, Abilities Renewal. Dahyuk was getting accustomed to the current situation very well. The future had now become the past he didn't remember, and he had no knowledge of this new world, just like the first time. Cho Chang-hun, a man dubbed as the guillotine on his first life before his memory went back in time, cringed. What? Surely, the first achievement should have been his. The street was in chaos, but he was the one who snapped a goblet's neck with his bare hand for the first time. However, he wasn't. The words signaling that he cleared the first achievement did not appear. As his eyes wandered, Chang-hun continued his steps deep into the alleys to avoid the goblets. A second goblet found him, but Chang-hun avoided its attack and got a hold of its neck. The goblet tried to fight its way out of the chokehold, but it was no use. The monstrous grip was a characteristic of Cho Chang-hun's nature. Snap. Who the hell is it? Chang-hun mumbled as he snapped the neck of the second goblet. Everywhere he looked, there was no one who could fight off the goblets. Everyone lost the confidence they once had and spread out to find a weapon or hide. It was a somewhat expected situation. King losers. One could understand the situation if one used their brain. Everyone who was here had two natures. There was no one stronger than those who had two natures. One nature they were born with, another nature they got from their first victim. One could only have two natures in their lifetime. Before the regression, it was rare to see anyone who killed someone because they calculated which nature they wanted. It took a long time for people to understand the meaning of nature, and most had blood on their hands before they could fully understand. However, this was a rare second chance. They needed to consider carefully before their first kill and created the perfect combination of natures they wanted to use. Cho Chang-hun was lucky. When he regressed, his longtime friend was next to him. His friend was someone who held such an envious nature, and Chang-hun always regretted to lose a chance to have him as his first kill. Therefore, he acted fast and snapped his friend's neck once he got a second chance. However, not everyone was this lucky. Some were already strong before the regression. Therefore, most of these scums probably killed the closest person in front of them to get the second nature without thinking twice about it. No matter what their natures are losers. The fundamental definition of garbage does not change. Look at them getting destroyed just because of one unforeseen incident. They could consider the difficulty they were facing a difference of the circumstances they once had in the past. Even if they lived the same future, there must be a huge gap between those who achieved experience with their own strength and those who followed the tales of another fighter. Whatever, it doesn't matter. Chang-hun mumbled as he hid in the alley. It was too bad he missed the first achievement. It wasn't the time to care much about one achievement they gave at the beginning. Yarmer's armor is mine. An item that transformed a woman who owned a useless nature into one of the strongest powers within the Korean peninsula. That item was in this section. There must be people with higher skills here. It was hard to decipher who, but one of them might have taken the first achievement. If Chang-hun could have the armor in his hands, he would be the strongest competitor in this section. Then, he could move further to a position of power to rule the second world. The most powerful position was held by Lord Dahyuk before the regression. Kikik. Chang-hun's eye sparkled with greed and ambition. Phew. Dahyuk put down the fire hydrant and calmed his harsh breath. 12 kills total. It resulted from him hiding in different places in the building and killed every goblet that came his way. He could still hear the cries of the goblets from outside, but his strength was bottoming out fast. So Dahyuk ran upstairs to hide in a janitor's closet at the end of the hall. He could barely breathe. Every bone and joint in his arms was in pain from swerving the weapon, but he could feel it. This is not my original body. He was stronger. This was a realization he got after crushing the goblets with the fire extinguisher. He could feel his strength and stamina explode compared to who he was before. If it was his original body, it would have burned out after 3 to 4 kills. Status: Dahyuk whispered the command word. Ability: Muscle Strength 17, Stamina 21, Agility 15, Magic 2, Endurance 17, Charisma 14, Achievement: The First Hunter, +2 Muscle Strength /Stamina /Agility to holder. There was no big difference in the numbers, but until a few hours ago, Dahyuk considered them as just numbers, but as Jaimin had told him, these were Dahyuk's means of survival. He tilted his head for a while, then he moved his finger above a word that piqued his curiosity. That was the answer. Muscle strength, force, determines the amount of weight you can lift and the speed of the body movements. Dahyuk placed his finger above each word from stamina to charisma to check each of the descriptions. Then, wallet. He checked his earnings. Wallet, current amount, 740, able to use the coins to increase the abilities. -50 coins needed to increase F rank, 0-10, ability. -200 coins needed to increase hash rank, 11-50, ability. He originally had 500 coins in his wallet. The words explained earlier how killing goblets appearing in front of him would give him 20 coins. Dahyuk recollected his composure as he increased the abilities he selected. Used 200 coins for +1 stamina, furious smiley. Dahyuk knew nothing. He didn't know which ability he needed to attain in order to gain better results. He could make assumptions though. Stamina, body stamina along with tolerance to physical shock, determines the resistance and natural recovery ability of various traumatic injuries. The more I rest, the more behind I get, Dahyuk thought. If he combined what Jaimin and the single-winged angel said, the only way to increase his abilities was through the usage of coins. Dahyuk knew only one way to earn coins: to kill monsters. Humans didn't kill each other on the streets. It seemed like there was no use in killing another human after earning a second nature. However, there's no guarantee that killing will stop. Those people who tried to kill Dahyuk from the market had no remorse. It was if they lived in a world where murder was a common circumstance. This meant that there could be a situation where humans must kill another human to defend themselves. Also, Dahyuk had no information. If he included the ones he got from Jaimin, the amount of information Dahyuk had compared to those who acted like they know everything was laughable. He had only one option. He needed to earn coins by all means and increase his body performance as much as possible. I don't even know how to use these natures yet. Dahyuk stood up. Thanks to the increase in his stamina, Dahyuk felt like he could breathe better. I don't want to die. He couldn't think of anything other than that. The world turned upside down in an instant. His life was in danger several times. Everything he heard was loads of nonsense about him killing a god and that he held a nature everyone wanted. He wanted to survive. It was an intense desire that felt uncomfortable even for Dahyuk himself. Maybe this was a side he didn't realize he had because he never felt the need to be so cautious. Dahyuk stepped out of the janitor's closet. He threw away the bent-up fire extinguisher he used until now and grabbed a new one. One step after another. He drew the interior of the building he remembered in his head and moved his feet. There is a small alley behind this building. There, he could attack the goblets entering the alley as he did in the building. Dahyuk opened the doors to the emergency stairs quietly. Then, in the stairway, they met. A skinny man in his 40s who was climbing the stairs stopped to look up at Dahyuk, but he soon smirked. I found you, ***. A nasty grin smeared his mouth. Who knew where he found it? But he had a metal skewer in his hand dripping with blood. I saw you. You were running all over the building to hide your ass when the goblets were running towards us. I saw it, you ***. You must have started from this neighborhood the last time, eh? This building is probably hiding a hidden item or a temple. Whatever that is, it seems like a weapon you can use right away. The man's eyes locked on the fire extinguisher in Dahyuk's hands. It was stain-free, recently picked up, and without a drop of blood. Hand it over while I'm still feeling nice, or I'll rip you apart into pieces. The man climbed up the stairs as he spat out daunting threats. You can't win over me. I killed so many goblets outsea. Before the man could finish his words, Dahyuk lunged his body down the stairs. He had enough time to think. In this changed world, threats to kill you don't end with the said threat. Dahyuk didn't have whatever the hell the man thought he had. But even if Dahyuk told the truth, it would be stupid of him to think this situation would end in peace. He attacked first then. There were about 15 flights of stairs between the man and Dahyuk. Luckily, the stairway was narrow, and the man was heading up the stairs. The combined weight of Dahyuk and the fire extinguisher contacted the man. Off. The two mangled bodies crashed down the stairs and fell to the landing. The metal skewer fell off the man's hand. Dahyuk released fire extinguisher he was holding, but he did not deliberately do so. Dahyuk's body was aching from crashing down the stairs and his eyes were rolling, but his hands were holding onto the man's hands. The man was choking his neck with an incredibly strong grip. Dahyuk remembered the disaster that happened in the park. A short and older man with a large gut was so skilled in fighting it felt as if he was a professional fighter. I can't win. There's no way I can win if I fight him. With nothing else in mind, he choked him back with all the power in him. It was a pure competition of strength. The man tried to fight his way out, but he had no chance since Dahyuk had the upper hand even from his position. In a shorter amount of time than Dahyuk expected, the man's body dropped. When Dahyuk calmed his mind, stab! A sharp and deep pain penetrated Dahyuk's thigh. Ara! Dahyuk screamed in pain, and the man regained his strength. The man shook himself off of Dahyuk's choke hold and stood up. What the F asterisk CK, you scared me, Arsh asteriskla. The man started to kick Dahyuk in a fit of rage. Dahyuk rolled his body to dodge the man's kick, pulled his body up, stood on his own feet, but his body couldn't function properly anymore. He had a knife stuck in his thigh. I almost got F asterisk CKED over. Har, I found a purpose for my useless nature. Long breath, isn't it F asterisk king stupid? Instead of attacking Dahyuk right away, the man calmed his breath while touching his neck. The end result had been decided. A blade the size of a fruit knife was struck deep inside his inner thigh and it had ripped Dahyuk's artery. Blood was spewing out between the blade and the scar. Dahyuk grabbed the blade with his quivering hand. Bone blade of Cuspid tribe, E, physical attack correction value, 3-7, durability, 19/20, holds bleed out promotion, LV, 2, option, looks jagged but it is hard to pull out once it's stabbed deep. Considered valuable to goblets. Oh, you'll die faster if you pull it out. The man grinned with a victorious look on his face. I think my item luck in this life is good. I'm feeling the secret you have would be a jackpot. Dahyuk couldn't concentrate on what the man was saying. It wasn't from the pain. Losing blood wasn't significant enough to lose his conscience, and it wasn't because he felt distraught from the miserable situation. Well, just think that you won't be able to die quickly by bleeding out. It was because he saw the words in front of him. Satisfied condition to activate nature, flavor of iron, word, use, digest, to consume, the item in hand, your F asterisk CKED. Digest. As soon as he murmured the word, the blade on his thigh glowed. Dahyuk cringed as he tasted the flavor of the item on his tongue. It was disgusting. The man's face cringed almost as badly as Dahyuk, but his expression was worse. It was no wonder because he realized the situation he was in. As he witnessed the blade disappearing without a trace, and the scar healing right before his eyes, yo, he could not believe who he had just messed with, who he had just dared to mess with. Intake complete, Furious Smiley, using most gained calories for wound care, Furious Smiley, gained bleeding palpate, LV, 1, before he could even read the letters, yo Dahyuk. His name popped out of the man's mouth. Dahyuk looked at the man, surprised, but he could understand the situation better. Dahyuk thought to himself if he should reveal his identity to the man, but he decided it was no use thinking about it. He took his mask off and showed him the lower half of his face. A groan came out of the man's mouth. Nonsense, no. Dahyuk's decision was right. This bastard. Dahyuk's revelation petrified the man. It was as Jaimin said. Dahyuk was the man who kicked major ass before the regression. Kasata said, you, the phenomenal 9, will not remember. But I do. Dahyuk bluffed without knowing what the man was saying. I also remember what you were saying just a minute ago. Did you say you'd tear my limbs, or how I won't be able to die in peace? Dahyuk might seem cold from the perspective of the observer, but it was 100% pure bluff. At least, Dahyuk knew one fact: bluffing could be valuable too in a fight if it worked on this guy. You're the one who will die. Now take responsibility for what you said. Oh, the man mumbled with a frightened expression. The man rushed to Dahyuk, not running away. He hadn't expected this situation. Dahyuk lifted his arms and balled up his body. The man's fist landed onto his ribcage, barely. He held his scream. The man's fist was sharp, too sharp for a man far in a calm state. I am not dying. The man, blinded by his fear, threw his fist mercilessly. Realizing the opponent he confronted was that Dahyuk was that much of a shock to him. However, as Dahyuk had experienced firsthand, the magnitude of the strikes this man was throwing half-consciously was far above the level of the average guy. It was as if his skills had been cultivated after surviving for many years. Die, die, die. The man's scream and the sound of a fist pounding Dahyuk filled the stairway. Dahyuk was silent as he took the blows. He heard it somewhere. Even in martial arts, as long as one protected the pressure points, it would be the offender who would lose their strength first. I can stand it. He didn't know of it at first, but consuming the knife from his thigh affected him more than just curing his wound. His stomach wasn't full, but he felt like he had just eaten a full-course meal, filling him with vitality. There shouldn't be much difference in our abilities, anyway. Then he will be the one to drop first. He couldn't be sure though. It was a speech to make him feel better. Dahyuk reassured himself to endure the pain. He recalled his cut was gone, and, the time had come, the point at which a man's physical strength bottomed out. The fatigue awakened the man. He turned his head, seeing the fire extinguisher and spears laying on the floor. As soon as his eyes and body retreated to pick them up, Dahyuk made his move. He planted a devastating blow on the man's face. Before the first moan was out of his mouth, Dahyuk threw the second and third punches. His punches seemed amateur compared to the man's punches, but they were blows which carried all of Dahyuk's physical strength. The man threw his body to the wall, raised his hands, and buried his head in them. He took the same pose as Dahyuk did before, but Dahyuk did not throw more punches right on the man. Instead, he gave a much heavier blow. Bash! He struck both of the man's arms. Off. Dahyuk picked up the fire extinguisher. He had enough practice with wielding a fire extinguisher during the last few hours, so his blows all landed successfully. Smash! The third blow broke the man's right arm. The man attempted to kick Dahyuk, but because the gap between them was too narrow, the first kick missed. He tried a second time, but it collided with the fire extinguisher that Dahyuk struck reflexively. The man broke his knee after receiving that blow. When the fire extinguisher landed on his broken torso, the man fell toward the lower stairs. Dahyuk did not bother helping the man. When the body stopped rolling to the bottom of the stairs, the neck of the stranger was bent over strangely. Killed human, Furious Smiley, gained 17 coins. What was that? There was a reason for not killing a human, but still, 17 was such an ambiguous number. Did the coin amount change depending on the condition? His trail of thoughts stopped here. Dahyuk was appalled with himself. He realized the coin was the first thing that came to his mind after he killed a person. His head was calmer than expected. To be honest, if this was the guilt of killing a person, it wasn't as bad as he thought. Then, he noticed his body trembling after 5 seconds or so. Slap. He slapped both sides of his cheeks with his palms. Let's move. It was natural for the mind to be unstable, but he was a modern man who lived a normal life for 20-something years and had just killed a man. That was that, and this was this. You have to move, otherwise, you'll die. He'd either forget about the whole thing like a psychopath or regret it for the rest of his life. Whatever happened had happened already, and he had to continue moving on towards newer goals. Whatever the F***ck happened in the mind, the body had to do things properly. Dahyuk looked at the fire extinguisher. The paint was peeled off and its bottom part was dented, but it seemed to have been able to play its role well. Good, with that murmur, he put the mask back on and went down the stairs. Slowly and discreetly, with prudence in all senses, he decided to head out and get more coins. He had no plans, and the best he could do was to survive. The streets were calm. There were more dead bodies than living ones, and they were all spread all over the place. Corpses either from goblets or humans lay around the blooded streets. There were no angels in sight, and maybe that affected the pheromones to fade. The goblets were diurnal creatures. They returned to their timid personality and hid somewhere to pass the night. Only the stragglers that woke up too late from the pheromones occasionally roamed the streets at night. There was a hunter who was looking for such stragglers. Struck. It was Dahyuk. Easy. Dahyuk could certainly feel it. He felt that the goblets were much weaker than when they were attacking, like they lost their minds. Dahyuk inspected the areas between the buildings and corners of the alleys to hunt the goblets one by one. Even though the goblets were weaker now, moving around in a much wider space while watching his back drained his mind and body. Goblet killed, Furious Smiley, gained 20 coins, Furious Smiley, wallet, current amount, 377 coins. Dahyuk ground his teeth to last longer. A little bit more. Dahyuk couldn't see anyone else hunting for goblets. He took this opportunity to earn as much coins as possible. Besides, the bone knife the man had before gave him so much power. If he could find items like that by killing the goblets, it was all the more reason to hunt. I can still kill 2 or 3 more. Dahyuk clenched his teeth and swung the fire extinguisher. What the hell is he doing? There were countless people watching Dahyuk with this question in their minds. Most of them were experts, and among the people in this quarantine zone, these were the guys who had the skills to reach the top before the regression. The reason why they were able to see Dahyuk was because they were sheltering at the high points of buildings, rocks, or trees. There, they were watching the whole street while taking a break. Can he even move tomorrow? Before the regression, there was one rule to follow to the T without exception. If it was not necessary to do so, one must not overwork their muscles to a certain degree. When the Black Tower, Kasata's needle, rotated for the first time, the whole human race underwent a forced development and awakening. That strength was not a superpower that came out indefinitely without a source. It consumed oxygen and calories, and it needed a breather and rest. They were only stronger, but the body was still judged by its limitations. This was why so many people in the world before the regression failed. They did not think of how much activity was appropriate for the reformed bodies and moved recklessly. It was no wonder then why their muscles ached. Of course, muscle pain was not a simple discomfort. It was a sign of overworked muscles recovering and regaining its strength. This was a phenomenon called supercompensation. However, that was only the case before the awakening. From the moment the world changed, humanity had exhausted the possibility of natural growth. There was no longer a supercompensation. The means of raising abilities could only be taken from the devices God and angels had arranged, such as achievements or coins. Therefore, one must not overwork their body. They must always leave an adequate room to prepare for this new world where one had no way of knowing when things would happen. Now, when the sun came up, the angels would present a new event. With that pace, well, even if he stops for a while, his body will scream in pain. Like others, Cho Chang-hoon looked down at Dahyuk with no emotion. He will be naturally thinned out since he can't move, or he'd die before then. But his ambition is impressive. If they were able to see Dahyuk, or if it wasn't for the mask he was wearing, they would realize the man behind this ridiculous sight was Dahyuk. Only then would everyone, including Cho Chang-hoon, have different thoughts. They would probably view his action as something that carried some kind of greater meaning, or they would have taken the risk to get down and cut off the buds of the big tree. However, the mask covered Dahyuk's face and ensured his security. So, the gazes of everyone held either ridicule or sympathy. With all of their eyes watching his every move, Dahyuk was able to hold onto his strength until he reached his breaking point. When he opened his eyes, there were two things he realized. First, it was daytime, and, he was experiencing an unbelievable anguish. He was inside a warehouse. When he felt he had drained every drop of his strength last night, Dahyuk walked to the nearby commercial building. Maybe it was nothing, but he could feel eyes on him he couldn't see. Therefore, he paid more attention before he called it a night and entered a small restaurant in the back of the building. The freezer that stored the food was turned off, so after closing the door and stacking boxes to block the entrance, he could close his eyes and relax. Everything seemed safe, but the problem was the muscle pain. It was much more intense yesterday when he collapsed with Jaimin after the first rotation of the Black Tower. In addition, his body was not healing itself. Dahyuk couldn't lift his upper body and moaned on the ground. It was so painful it felt like he was losing consciousness every time he closed his eyes. Splat! After falling on his head multiple times, Dahyuk barely held up his arms to lift his upper body. I have to eat. Of course, he had no appetite in this situation, but his body, or his instinct, was telling him to consume something. He was empty now. He was exhausted. If he did not eat, he would experience for more terrible things. His trembling arms patted the stacked boxes, then spilled everything from inside because he couldn't lift anything out of them. Thanks to that, he was able to eat what spilled out. Soggy half-rotten raw meat, unwashed vegetables, freezer-dried rice and various noodles. There were even sauces. Using his hands and his mouth, Dahyuk chewed all that fell on the floor at random. When he became weak, he would rest and be completely still like a corpse, then he woke up once again to eat more. Like a worm that wriggled on the floor. He was refueling the price of the action he consumed the night before through calories and relaxation. I want to live. The light coming in through the vents was cut off. A full day had passed, and now it was nighttime again. Something must have happened outside. However, Dahyuk was inside the whole time, just like how the experts thought while making fun of him. Finally, the pain began to fade to such an extent that he could feel that his stomach was satisfied. Dahyuk closed his eyes. Phew. Not to faint, but to sleep. Then, satisfied the condition to activate nature, over the horizon, body, holders, stimulation, exceeded the limit, furious smiley, exceeded the limit in proportion to the received, stimulation, and mind, finally able to fully rest, activate super regeneration, he started to grow. Dahyuk opened his eyes, feeling the soreness throughout his body. However, that was the only kind of soreness that one would have after getting a good muscle workout from the previous day. He rose and looked around. The area was a mess. I ate too much. He opened the door and went out to the restaurant. The clock on the wall indicated that it was almost noon. He had spent an entire afternoon yesterday in pain, and also spent the night and morning in his sleep. I can't keep doing this. Dahyuk rubbed his face. He now learned what would happen if he overworked himself. It was too much of a pain to bear. I bet a lot of things happened after that. About 12 hours had passed from his room with Jaimin to this restaurant in his aching body. There was no telling what might have happened during those 24 hours he spent passed out in this place. Status, Dahyuk mumbled. Ability, Strength, 29. Stamina, 30. Agility, 24. Magic, 2. Endurance, 23. Charisma, 21. Too many stats had changed. If he remembered correctly, his stats should have been this. Ability, Strength, 17. Stamina, 24. Agility, 15. Magic, 2. Endurance, 17. Charisma, 14. If only his lower digits changed, he would have accepted it, but this was too big of a difference. Dahyuk then mumbled with a shaky voice, W wallet. If he remembered correctly, he hadn't used his coins to increase his stats yet, but if he did it without knowing, wallet, current coins, 757. The number of coins was as he remembered it. It doesn't make sense. The number of coins he acquired from killing about 30 goblets was about 640 coins. The increased stats would have required at least thousands of coins, so it didn't make sense. He scratched his head in confusion. That message. Dahyuk came to an answer. Before he fell asleep, he remembered the message he saw. Satisfied the condition to activate nature, over the horizon, over the horizon. The nature that wasn't owned by Dahyuk originally. If I faint, my stats go up after resting. He guessed on the skill's effects. If he continued to overwork himself like yesterday, would his stats go up without using coins? He almost said it was lucky, but shook his head. His stats did increase, but he ended up losing 24 hours. He wasn't sure what value that lost time would hold. Then, he heard a sound. It came from outside the restaurant, within the building. There was voice screaming in agony echoing through the building. Dahyuk then walked out to the corridor and realized it was a man's scream coming up from the first floor. He silently walked down the emergency stairway towards the first floor. As he came down, he peeked out to the corridor, and there he was. Eek! Dahyuk couldn't see his bottom, but his upper body was covered in blood. He was trying to get into the building, but he couldn't as he was severely injured. This is too different. Why is there the elite mob from SE second? He couldn't continue as something appeared from the back, crushing the man's head. Dahyuk gasped. It was a large hook, connected to a chain. It penetrated the man's head, killing him instantly. The chain was pulled by some unknown entity from the outside and man's body was dragged along with it. Dahyuk didn't hesitate, but he tried to walk up the stairs again. But you were here. What? There was a giant man waiting behind him. It was the angel. One of the one-winged angels that he met yesterday was looking down at him from behind. Dahyuk quickly swung his extinguisher. Ooh, don't do that. The angel easily blocked with his single hand. Don't be afraid, poor thing. I'm not here to hurt you. And he used his other hand to turn Dahyuk in his direction. I guess you were separated, so you don't know what happened to this region today. What happened? You're shaking? The angel spoke as if it was a weird thing. Yes, this is a normal reaction I suppose. But your people don't fear us, you know. Actually, I would say your people are really rude. The angel gently pushed Dahyuk to make him walk toward the entrance and continue talking. Actually, what we were trying to give you yesterday wasn't anything special. Do you remember those small things you fought during your first night? Goblet. Yes, we were going to bring out more civilized, weaponized goblets next. You were supposed to face them on the second day. But your people were too rude. We were going to give you guys some tips on fighting the goblets and the status windows, you know. And guess what was the reaction? Dahyuk licked his lips. It seemed like this angel enjoyed using Dahyuk's fear against him. Then, they ignored you. They didn't fear you, thinking they knew everything. Exactly. The angel raised his voice. They acted like they knew everything and they just want to end it quickly. Oh, how rude it was. So I added a bonus for such arrogance. The angel and Dahyuk then came to the corner where the man was taken by the chain. Dahyuk was now able to see outside of the building.